The woods were dark. Jenna, Max, Chris, and Ashley laughed. They were going camping. It was a tradition. Every Halloween, they dared to spend a night in these woods.
Remember last year when Chris swore he saw a ghost?
Chris swatted at Max's arm.
I did too. It was right over there.
He pointed to a gnarled oak tree. Ashley shivered.
Let's just set up camp. I want to be around the fire.
Jenna smiled. She loved the thrill of being scared. It was part of the fun. They ventured deeper into the woods, their laughter echoing through the trees. The friends set up their tents. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows on their faces. They told stories and roasted marshmallows. But as the night deepened, the woods grew silent. A low wind rustled the leaves. It sounded like whispers. Jenna felt a shiver crawl up her spine. She glanced at her friends. Their faces were illuminated by the firelight. For a moment, they looked like strangers.
Did you hear that?
Ashley whispered, her eyes wide. Max chuckled.
Hear what? It's just the wind.
But even he sounded unsure. Max decided to get more firewood. He grabbed his flashlight and disappeared into the darkness. The others waited, listening to the sound of his footsteps crunching on leaves. Then silence. Minutes passed.
Max?
Only silence answered him. Jenna felt a knot of fear tighten in her stomach. Ashley's voice trembled. Jenna shone her flashlight into the darkness, but the beam was swallowed by the trees. Chris decided to find Max.
Stay here.
He told Jenna and Ashley. He disappeared into the trees, his flashlight bobbing like a firefly in the distance. Jenna and Ashley huddled together, fear creeping into their hearts. The silence stretched on. They called out for Max and Chris, but their voices were swallowed by the woods. Jenna felt a cold dread settle over her. Something was wrong, terribly wrong.
We need to get help.
Ashley whispered, her voice thick with fear. Before Jenna could answer, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. It was Chris. The sound echoed through the trees, sending shivers down her spine. Jenna and Ashley jumped to their feet, their blood turning to ice. The forest, once a place of adventure, now felt like a sinister trap. They stared into the darkness, their hearts pounding. Then, silence again. The oppressive quiet was almost worse than the scream.
Chris, where are you? Ashley's voice trembled, barely louder than a whisper.
Jenna's breath caught in her throat. She was alone. The realization was paralyzing. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Max was gone. The forest seemed to close in around her. Chris was gone. And Ashley. The darkness swallowed their names.
Ashley? Ashley? Jenna's voice cracked with desperation.
Jenna whirled around. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but it revealed nothing. Ashley was nowhere to be seen. The forest was an endless void. Panic surged through Jenna like a tidal wave. Her mind raced with terrifying possibilities. She was completely alone in the darkness. The weight of isolation pressed down on her.
Oh no. Jenna's voice was barely audible, choked with fear.
Jenna stood alone in the woods, her flashlight beam shaking. The light flickered, casting eerie shadows, her face a mask of terror. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent her heart racing. She knew she had to find her friends, but the darkness seemed to stretch on forever, an impenetrable barrier between her and safety. Jenna ran. Her breath came in ragged gasps, each step echoing the pounding of her heart. The forest was a maze of shadows and whispers, each one urging her to move faster. She didn't know where she was going, but she had to get away. Every direction seemed the same, a never-ending labyrinth of trees and darkness. The fear gnawed at her, pushing her forward. The trees blurred into streaks of black and gray, their twisted forms like specters reaching out to grab her. The night was alive with the sounds of her flight, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the snap of twigs. Branches whipped at her face, tearing at her clothes. Each scratch was a reminder of her desperation, a mark of her struggle against the forest that seemed to conspire against her. She tripped over a root and fell, scraping her hands on the forest floor. Pain shot through her palms, but she barely noticed. The urgency to escape was all-consuming.
No, keep going, gotta keep going. Her voice was a whisper, a plea to herself to not give up, to keep fighting.
Panic threatened to consume her. It was a beast, lurking just beneath the surface, ready to pounce. She could feel its claws digging into her mind, trying to pull her into the abyss of fear. She scrambled to her feet and stumbled backward, her back hitting a rough surface. The impact jolted her, momentarily clearing her mind. A tree. She was trapped. The realization hit her like a cold wave, freezing her in place. The forest had closed in around her, leaving her with nowhere to run.
No, no, please, I can't be trapped. Her voice was a broken whisper, a desperate plea to the uncaring night.
Jenna backed against a tree, her eyes wide with terror, her mind racing for a way out. The forest seemed to close in tighter, the darkness pressing against her, her flashlight illuminating the dark woods around her. The beam cut through the night, revealing only more shadows and the endless expanse of trees. She knew she had to find a way out, but the forest seemed to have other plans. Then she heard it, singing, faint at first, then growing louder. It was a haunting melody, filled with a chilling joy that sent shivers down her spine. And the voices, they sounded familiar. The singing was coming from all around her, closing in.
What is that?
Jenna's blood ran cold. She knew that tune. It was the song they had been singing earlier, around the campfire. But these voices, they were twisted, distorted, wrong.
No, it can't be. It can't be them.
Jenna's terrified face was illuminated by her flashlight as she heard the eerie singing drawing closer. Jenna fumbled with her flashlight, her hand shaking uncontrollably. She aimed the beam into the darkness, desperately searching for the source of the singing. The light flickered across the trees, catching glimpses of movement, shadows, shapes. Then the beam landed on them.
Max, Chris, and Ashley.
They were standing in a circle around her, their faces illuminated by the flashlight's beam. But their eyes were not their own. They were pitch black, like bottomless pits, filled with an ancient, unspeakable evil.
Guys?
Jenna's voice was a strangled whisper.
It's me, Jenna. Don't you recognize me?
But her friends didn't respond. They just kept singing, their voices growing louder, more insistent. They stepped closer, their shadows stretching towards her like grasping claws. Jenna was frozen in terror, her mind reeling.
Please stop it. This isn't funny.
But her words were lost in the chilling melody that filled the night. The circle tightened. The first rays of dawn filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. The woods were silent, save for the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. The previous night's terror seemed like a distant nightmare. But the remnants of the campsite told a different story. The tents lay abandoned, their entrances gaping open like empty mouths. The campfire had long since burned out, leaving behind only a pile of smoldering ash. And there was no sign of the four friends who had so cheerfully ventured into the woods the night before. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but the missing teenagers were never found. The community was gripped by a sense of loss and helplessness. Parents clung to hope, while friends and neighbors organized vigils and continued to search the dense, unforgiving forest. The once vibrant laughter of the four friends was now a haunting memory, echoing through the trees. The search parties eventually gave up, and the tragic story of the four friends who disappeared in the woods became a local legend. The forest, once a place of adventure and joy, turned into a symbol of sorrow and mystery. The missing teenagers' faces, immortalized on weathered flyers, became a constant reminder of the unresolved tragedy. Then one day, a group of hikers stumbled upon a gruesome sight deep within the forest. They had ventured off the beaten path, drawn by an eerie feeling that something was amiss. As they pushed through the thick underbrush, the air grew colder, and an unsettling silence enveloped them. The hikers' hearts pounded as they approached a clearing where the sight that awaited them would forever be etched in their minds. Hanging from the branches of a gnarled oak tree were four figures. The twisted limbs of the tree seemed to reach out like skeletal hands, holding the lifeless bodies in a macabre embrace. The scene was surreal, almost as if the forest itself had conspired to keep the secret hidden for so long. Their clothes were torn and weathered, their bodies decomposed beyond recognition. The elements had taken their toll, leaving behind only fragments of what once were vibrant young lives. The hikers could barely comprehend the horror before them as the reality of the situation began to sink in. But one thing was clear: they had not died peacefully. The scene spoke of a struggle, a desperate fight for survival that ended in tragedy. The forest, with its ancient trees and hidden secrets, had witnessed the final moments of these young souls. Their eyes, staring blankly into eternity, were wide with a terror that would haunt the woods for years to come. The hikers, shaken to their core, knew that the discovery would reopen old wounds and reignite the mystery that had plagued the community for so long. The forest, now a silent witness to the grim discovery, would never be the same again.